So yeah, this is Champoy. I'm here with Jeanette Lazam.
Yeah.
Yeah, is that how you say it? So I guess just kind of more like demographic, like kind of question. I was just maybe thinking about maybe some of their earliest memories of like being, I guess, like a child, or maybe just like where that was and where you were born, and maybe some of your earliest memories.
Yeah, I was born in New York City, and I'm the product of public housing. So I lived in public housing with my family from day one to when I was 14. And then I graduated from junior high school, or is now considered middle school. And then we moved to California. And we moved to Santa Clara at the time. And of course, it wasn't designated as Silicon Valley yet, and all the tech industry hadn't arrived yet. We're talking about the mid 1960s, so it was still a very laid back area. And then after a while, we moved to San Francisco. Stop it.
To Clay.
Oh,
so okay, we can also just cut those parts, but yeah.
Right.
If we need to pause or kind of,
We moved to San Francisco, and then I I was going to Mission High School, and I got kicked out for a concealed weapon.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because I was getting beat up, because I came from New York, and I had a New York accent, and I had a black leather jacket, and so people had a difficult time with me, and I had a difficult time with them, and I didn't grow up being Filipino.
Okay.
I grew up in New York, and my first understanding of who I was reflected who was around me at the time, and that was Jewish. For the longest time, I thought I was Jewish, and my father said, "No, you're not." And then when we finally moved from New York to California, I was Puerto Rican black, so it's like I went through all these identities before I finally met up in a very comprehensive way Filipinos on the West Coast. And from that point on, my curiosity about what are Filipinos, who are Filipinos, where did they come from, was very intense for me. And within my lifetime, I lived 7 years, all told, in Cebu and Ormoc, Leyte. When I was there, I did learn how to speak Cebuano, but when I came here, I lost it because I had no one to dialogue with. My brother grew up in the Philippines along with my mother, and she taught him how to speak Cebuano, and then he learned how to speak Tagalog watching the soap operas on TV, right? So I have a whole history of being in the Philippines right before during the imposition of martial law and my activity, and then my final flee from the Marcos government back to the United States. So in a nutshell, that's New York, California, the Philippines, back. Those are three major, and then within that, God bless you, within that, there are a lot of detours, stuff like that. So.
Thank you. No, that's really helpful. So I guess now more kind of in the present, just kind of maybe, I was gonna say, like sharing about like where we are right now. I mean, also where you are in terms of that, and just maybe about the space in general that we were in. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, in 2021, I got a call from Caroline Kabading, the executive director of Manila Town. And she said, there's an opening for you to move here. And I was not ready to move. I really wanted to stay in Ashland. But the person that I was living with at the time, her house, she sold it because she wanted to get out. She had about had enough of the wildfires and the smoke and the blah, blah, blah. So I looking for an apartment, and I couldn't find anything in Ashland. And it was really sad because I really wanted to stay there. I had gotten farther and farther away from large cities and more into the rural parts of the West Coast. Because I found it to be quiet, relaxing, very peaceful. And this whole thing about being one with nature, well, yeah. True to life. That is true to life. I was absolutely and positively very calm living in Ashland, Oregon. I mean, prior to that, I lived in Taos, New Mexico. And that was a whole different scene. But I wasn't ready to move back here yet. And I had been away from the International Hotel for about 40 years. We got evicted in 77. I bumped around after that, trying to find myself. But I never came back here. I never even came back here for the, what did they call the anniversary of the eviction? Because it was just too painful for me. And so where I am now is that I've been in the iHotel for the last 3 years. I still have not adjusted really well. And the insides of the hotel, where I'm talking about the tenancy. When I lived there initially, I was 27 years old. Now I'm 75. This place was predominantly Filipino. And it had a whole different character to it. I mean, it was really a community within a community. Here now, it's probably about 95 to 96% Chinese, monolingual. And you know that in order to be able to develop a relationship, friendship, there has to be dialogue. And the problem I have is that they're monolingual and speak very little English. I don't speak Chinese, Mandarin, nor Cantonese. And with Manang Pat, who lives about 3 doors down, she kind of aptly said it. For the Filipinos that live in this building, it's lonely. Because there are only 5 of us.
Wow.
Yeah, in comparison to, it used to be like the reverse. So it's also, once you close your door to your apartment, that's it. The outside world stays outside and you're inside. And the only time you get to interact is when you open that door, go downstairs, and, but then I'm hitting the language problem. It's not their problem. It's not my problem. That's just a fact of life. So, I vowed that the next time when the wait list for the hotel opens up, which is in 2028, I'm hoping I'm still alive, I want to get as many Filipino elderly people as I can to move into the hotel or be on that waiting list. The only reason why I got on real quick was because I used to live here. And we had preferential treatment if you were an ex-tenant. And the thing about it is that I was I am the last living tenant. So there's no
Yeah.
other tenants that can find that, fill that category.
Yeah. Wow. No, thank you for sharing that. That's very like profound. And I was curious actually, having been here, as a tenant in the past, and when it was a different maybe form and shape. I was just curious of like at that time thinking of also what you were sort of like fighting for in terms of like because I was curious like how did the current structures sort of like come about, and did it reflect any of those other kind of things that a lot of your activism at that time were sort of fighting for, you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think for each individual tenant as well as supporter of the I Hotel, you come to an understanding that there's going to be this major eviction. They're going to evict 56 elderly people with a few young people. And for people who are non-Filipino, and for Filipinos that don't know their history real well in the United States, you first come at the hotel as stopping the eviction because 56 elderly people are going to get evicted, predominantly Filipino. And it's later on, as you interact with the tenants, as you interact with the history of this area, you come to an understanding that Manila Town was not just only 10 blocks long, but Manila Towns in the United States were the first Filipino communities built. And this Manila Town, like Stockton, like Sacramento, like Seattle, they were thriving communities. They were communities that had everything, if you were Filipino, everything you ever wanted. From gambling to prostitution to food to art to dancing. It had everything. Boxing, everything. Pool halls, everything. That if you were a Filipino during the 1920s through the 30s, this was your place. This was your place. And you were going to defend that, Of course, the men that lived here, they were, after their stint in the armed forces, a lot of them joined the Merchant Marines, so they would come and go. But the International Hotel and all the surrounding hotels remained their home for, like Benny Gallo said, over 65 years. He lived here. Him and Frank, this guy Frank, if you watch the I Hotel, the fall of the I Hotel, they were in World War I and II. But they always came back here. If you were a Lascaro working in the canneries in the Alaskan, you came back here. If you were working the migratory farm route, you came back here. If you were a waiter downtown, you lived here. This was Manila Town. And that's the understanding that I came out of from this struggle. It wasn't just the I Hotel. It was a community that serviced its residents. So if I look at it now, that community died. The Manila Town here died once the International Hotel, once we were evicted and once we were removed. It took over 23 years for another building to be built. And while this building has all the amenities and the niceties that anyone would want to have living in San Francisco, plus it's low income, it's not the same. The only Manila town that exists are in the hearts and the minds of people who remember it, and the bearers downstairs, the cultural bearers downstairs in the Manila Town Heritage Foundation Center. It's not the same. Because, when I would come home from work and I would come in through the doors of the front doors, people were hanging out, They were hanging outside, they were hanging.
In the past, you mean?
Yes,
Okay.
hanging. You'd walk up the stairs, and people would say, "Have you eaten yet? Have you eaten yet? How was your day?" You would be like...
Community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you could, it would take about an hour to get to your room because people genuinely wanted to know if you haven't eaten yet, how are you, how'd your day go. It was, I had 55 fathers and 10 mothers, who watched out for me. Now, it's not the same.